All right, we go to the book of Hebrews this morning, the book of Hebrews, chapter number 11. The book of Hebrews, chapter number 11. If you have your bulletin, your News of Hope today, you realize that we have the 2015 resolutions in our bulletin, and we are promoting these throughout the year. We're putting them in the bulletin every week for the month of January and then promoting these, and then I am going to preach a message on each of these in the Sunday morning services as we go along. This being the third Sunday of January, we're on number 3 there, which is Abraham. But we've already studied Paul, and it says, like Paul, I will forget those things which are behind and press forward, not let those things hold me up. And then like David, I will lift mine eyes to the hills, from which my help comes. And how true that is this morning, our help does come from the Lord. And we preached on that last Sunday morning. Today we're going to study the story of Abraham and how that Abraham just believed God and how that we in our lives just need to believe God. Whatever God says, we just need to believe. And we're going to see that in the life of Abraham here this morning. Hebrews chapter 11, beginning in verse number 8. Hebrews 11. By the way, if you know this, this chapter is called Faith's Hall of Fame. It talks about faith and the different people who had great faith in God. And he put them in Faith's Hall of Fame here. Verse 8, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed. And he went out not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, in heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. By faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. Now, that is impressive faith, as we're going to see here this morning. Abraham was a man of faith, had impressive faith. And the Bible, God was so impressed with Abraham's faith that in the book of Romans, chapter number 4 and verse 11, the Bible says that Abraham is the father of all who believe. The father of all who believe. Just very impressed. God was very impressed with the faith of this man and how he just believed God. When God said something, Abraham just believed it. And boy, how we need to be like Abraham here in the year 2015. Now, the three things, of course, that we saw here in this particular passage that Abraham was so highly regarded by God because of, he believed in inheritance that he never actually received. He believed in a child that he was too old to father. And when he was asked to sacrifice this son as an offering, Abraham actually believed that God could raise him from the dead. Absolutely impressive faith that we see here in Abraham. Now, we look at Abraham and we see that he is impressive in his faith, he's strong in his faith, and we look and we say, there's no way I could do that. There's no way I could be like Abraham. There's no way that I could just believe God just the way Abraham did. Well, of course, you know I disagree with that. I disagree with that kind of thinking. Because I believe this morning that we can believe, just like Abraham here believed. People say, well, he's just different from me. He's a strong person. I just wrestle all the time with doubt and all of these things in my mind. And there's just no way I can just believe God the way that Abraham did. When God said it, he just believed it and obeyed and acted on it. Oh, okay. So you thinking that God's going to get you to do something that he wouldn't give you the power to do? That's not a very nice God, is it? That's not a very good God, is it? And of course, I know that is not the fact. God, I believe, also knew that, it's hard sometimes to relate to a superhero of faith. And so what God does is he also tells us some things about Abraham that Abraham might not want to have revealed. Are there anything in your life that you don't want everybody to know about? Sure there is. And here this morning, you may have a strong faith and a belief in God, and you do want to obey God and be righteous and live for God, and praise God for that. That's absolutely marvelous. But we all are sinners. There's nobody that's 100% sinless here this morning. We're all sinners. We all have things in our lives. And Abraham had some things in his life. And so I believe God put those in the Bible so that we could truly relate to Abraham. Even though Abraham was a great man of faith, he believed God, he obeyed in all these instances. Mighty impressive stuff here this morning. Yet there were times that Abraham did not do right. When God told Abraham back in Genesis chapter 12, he said, I want you to leave your homeland and I want you to go to a place that I'll lead you to go. He didn't even know where it was going to be. Abraham didn't. God did. And he said, I'll just leave you. But God told Abraham, he said, I want you to leave your father's household behind. That's in Genesis chapter 12 and verse 1. Leave your father's household behind. You and Sarah, y'all get up and y'all take off and take all your servants and all your cattle and all your possessions, and you take off and you just follow me, and I'm going to lead you to another land. Now Abraham came home that night and said, Sarah, we're moving. I said, where are we moving to? I don't know, but we're moving. All right? That would not be exciting for you wives to hear, would it? But that's exactly what happened. Now, it says to leave your father's household behind. Did Abraham leave all of his father's household behind? The answer is no. He took his nephew Lot with him. And if you know anything about the story about Abraham and Lot, you know there was constant strife, bickering. Lot just gave Abraham a fit in many, many ways. And they finally came to a point, you'll remember the story, and if you don't, then you're getting ready to hear it. They got to a point where Abraham said, we are going to split up today. You're going to go your way, and I'm going to go my way. Now, Abraham told Lot, he says, you can choose this grassy area over here, this grassy plain over here, or you can choose the desert over here. But if you go to the grassy place, I'm going to the desert. You go to the desert, I'm going to the grassy plain. Now, we know that Lot chose the grassy plain toward Sodom and Gomorrah. And we know the rest of the story on that. And if you don't, you can read that in the middle chapters of Genesis when you get home today. So, Abraham disobeyed God, and people might say, well, that was just a little disobedience. He just brought his nephew with him. God said, leave all your father's household behind. But he brought Lot. And so God shows us, of course, that Abraham did fail. He was not perfect. Now, he believed God, and he's in Faith's Hall of Fame, but he was not perfect. God is allowing us to be able to relate to him. There was also another time where God came to Abraham and said, Abraham, you're going to have a son. And he said, do what? I'm too old. I'm too old. He said, my wife is surely too old. But anyhow, he ultimately, of course, did believe God, but he knew that they were going on in years. Sarah had a hard time believing God totally as well. And God tells us some of these stories so we can relate to these people. And I'm going to get to a point of this. You remember that God had told them that they're going to have a son, but then it was delayed. I mean, it just didn't happen right away. It was delayed. And for years, it was delayed. So what Sarah did one day, she said, well, God said that we were going to have a son, but it don't look like it's going to be me involved. So Abraham, what I want you to do is I want you to take my handmaid here and I want you to go in into her and see if God will give you a son by her. And so that's exactly what happened. Now, was God pleased with that? Not at all. But that's exactly what happened. Abraham and Hagar came together, and Hagar ended up with a baby, and it was a baby boy, and his name was Ishmael. And if you know anything about Ishmael, you know that he is the father of the Arab nations. And I ask you this, have the Arabs and Jews fighting today? Yes, they are. Have they fought for centuries? Yes, they have. And it's all because they just didn't wait on God. Just didn't wait on God. Just didn't wait on God. And then, of course, there was another time that Abraham had to go to Egypt because there was a famine in the land, and so Abraham and Sarah were going to go to Egypt. And so Abraham, he says now, he looked at his wife Sarah and he said, "You are good looking. You are a knockout." Now that's in the Bible, it's in the Hebrew. You have to read, you have to understand Hebrew in order to read, to understand it. He said, "You are just gorgeous. And we're going to get down here into Egypt, and those Egyptian rulers are going to want you, and they're going to kill me, and they're going to take you from me, and then, you know, we're not going to have our happy home anymore." This was before all their kids and stuff now. And so they got down there, and what did they do? They lied. So this is my sister. This is my sister. Well, one day, Abraham and Sarah were caught sporting, smooching, osculating. If you know what osculation is, that's kissing. They were kissing. And the Egyptians saw them and said, "I don't think that's his sister. Got to be his wife." And they brought him in and said, "Did you lie to us?" And he had said, "Yes, I did lie to you. That's just my wife." And they said, the Egyptians told him, and said, "Listen, you were going to bring the wrath of God upon us by your lies." And so they got out of that situation. But let me tell you something. If you read the scriptures, he did it one time, and then later on he did it again. The very same thing. Didn't learn from the first time. Now, God was not pleased with all of those things. And here was a man who believed God, the father of all who believed, who did not even believe at this time that God could take care of him. And so he says, "Well, you have to be my sister." And so God puts all those bad things about Abraham to remind us that we can relate to him, because we want to be people of faith. We want to be people that believe God, but there's going to be times where we are going to struggle and even fail. And so do you give up? No, you don't give up. You keep on going. You keep on going. Now, God tells us all those things. Did he tell us those to embarrass Abraham? No. It's like the teenagers. You know, they get to be teenagers, and we say, "All right, you give me any more trouble, I'm going to start showing off these pictures of you when you were younger." We threaten them. "Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. I'll straighten up." Well, let me tell you something. God did not do that to Abraham. But he did that and told us those stories so that you and I would realize that this great man who is in Faith's Hall of Fame for believing God is really no different than you and I. Really no different. He made mistakes. He struggled. He stumbled in his obedience. He groped in the darkness of uncertainty. And I'm telling you, he's just like you and me here today. So can we be people who believe God? Yes, we can. So, how could God call this man a man of faith, the father of all who believe? He obviously disappointed God on a number of occasions. He fell short of the giant we would expect him to be. How could this man be such a great example of faith? I heard this story about John Rockefeller, and you may have heard the name. When he was running his gigantic empire called the Standard Oil Company a number of years ago, of course. And one of his employees made a decision that cost the company $2 million. And boy, man, fear just came through the whole company. He figured he was going to fire that guy and he was going to fire a whole lot of other folks. But one of his partners, Mr. Bedford, came to see Rockefeller that day, and as he entered Mr. Rockefeller's office, he saw John Rockefeller writing on a tablet on his desk. And eventually he looked up and he said, "Oh, Mr. Bedford, you're here." And he said, what are you doing? And he said, "Well, I've been thinking about our loss, but this is what I'm doing. Before I ask the man to come in to discuss the matter, I've been making some notes." And so what Rockefeller was doing, he was writing on a paper and he was saying, "Point in favor of Mr. So-and-so." And he wrote down a number of things that Mr. So-and-so had done for the company. And there was times where Mr. So-and-so had done for the company that helped them to earn millions of dollars. And so he said to Mr. Bedford, he said, "I'm not going to fire the guy. I'm not going to fire him at all. Matter of fact, he has made us more money than what he has cost us. And so he's worth so much." And see, I think, listen to me, that God sees us like that. Listen to me. Just listen to me. God viewed Abraham. Yes, he made mistakes. He failed God. He had a past that he had disappointments in his life. But God didn't look at Abraham to see his past. God looked at Abraham to see his potential, to see his possibilities, to really look down into his heart and see truly he was a man of faith. He was a man who believed God. We all fail. We all fail. Some of us are going to stumble along the path, just like Abraham did, but there was something different about him. Something different. Something that made him stand above all of those who lived around him in his day. See, God was the one that picked Abraham out from thousands of others to start the nation of Israel. What was so different about him? He made mistakes. He faltered. But yet, he was really, truly a man of faith. A man who believed God. He was not perfect, but he believed God. And the Bible tells us in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, look at it. "But without faith it is impossible to please Him. For he that cometh to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him." Seeking God is what Abraham wanted. And so now we see how Abraham acted in faith, acted to believe God. Look at verse 8 again. It says, "When he was called out to go into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went." Now, why in the world would you pick up and just take off not even knowing where you're going? That seems a little odd. Seems a little weird. But that's what he did. You know why? Because look at verse 10. "For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God." In other words, listen to me, Abraham did not care where he went as long as it was with God. He didn't care where he went as long as God was there with him. He didn't care where he lived. He was living in a tent from place to place to place, never had a home to live in. He didn't own any land per se, except where he buried his wife. But he said, "Would you be there, God? Are you going to be there? Then I want to be there." Then in verse 11, it talks about the birth, the conception and the birth of Isaac. And here, Abraham was enabled to be a father when he was past childbearing years. And Sarah was able to be a mother when she was past childbearing years. Now, some of you have had babies later on in life. Dana and I were actually called Abraham and Sarah a few years ago. But that's all right, because that's cool. And it's good. And of course, it's been a great blessing. But I'm telling you, he was enabled to become a father. Do you know how old he was when Isaac was born? 100 years old. Now, every now and then you may hear somebody in their 50s giving birth. You might even hear somebody in their 60s. It's certainly a rare thing, but you might hear it. When's the last time you heard a 100-year-old couple having a baby? By the way, I'll remind you why God does give babies. Y'all know why, to younger folks, right? Because older folks will put them down and forget where they put them. So that's why God gives babies to younger folks. So there you go. Abraham just believed that God could do this. Now, that was a miracle. That was a miracle. Some of you here today, you'd say, it'd be a miracle if we had a baby. God made him the promise. He believed it. And then one of the big events in Abraham's life, of course, happened in verse 17 and 18 here. It says, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. I'm going to tell you right now, that would be a toughie. Here is this son you have waited for all these years. And by the way, Isaac was not a little kid at this time, okay? He was a grown man at this time. And God came to Abraham one day and he said, Abraham, I want you to go sacrifice your son Isaac. And of course, you know, humanly speaking, Abraham said, that is my son. That's my only begotten son. That's the son of promise. But God, if you said it, then somehow, some way, good is going to come out of this. Somehow, some way, you are going to bring him back to life or whatever. And I ask you this, had God told Abraham that you sacrifice your son, I'll bring him back to life? He had not told him that. Had Abraham ever seen anybody come back to life? No, he had never seen that. But the Bible tells us, you can read it there in the next verse where it talks about how he says, verse 19, accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. Now, why would Abraham reason that way? He said, well, somehow he's made a promise for me to have this son, and he's now told me to do this, so somehow, some way, God's going to bring him back to life so that he can live again. That was Abraham's reasoning and belief. See, God had made a promise. God had made a promise. And I'm just going to believe God. Now, listen, if God, and God would not do this today, by the way. But if God asked you to sacrifice your child, would you immediately go to it? Or would you, I'm going to wait around here a day or two and see if God will change his mind. I'm going to leave town. Try to hide from God. What would you do? Abraham told Isaac, he said, buddy, we're going on a little trip here. Come on. And you know the story too, when they got there. And Isaac, of course, being a willing sacrifice. It's a beautiful picture, by the way, of the Lord Jesus Christ giving up his life willingly. But Isaac just laid down on the altar, did what his daddy told him to do. And you remember Isaac said, Dad, see the wood and the altar here, but where's the sacrifice? He said, God himself will be the sacrifice. God will send a sacrifice. God himself will be the sacrifice, in essence. And that's a whole nother message in and of itself. But yet, Abraham brought that knife down, and the angel stopped him. He said, yes, you've proven that you believe God. He did not have to sacrifice his son, and then they looked, there was a ram caught in the thicket that they were able to sacrifice. God had made a promise. Abraham just believed it, no matter what God told him to do. You ever heard the term blind faith? Blind faith. Now, to some people, blind faith, they just kind of get uncomfortable a little bit. Say, blind faith? Faith that opposes reason and all of these other things? I got a problem with that. But I'm going to tell you, Abraham was a man of blind faith. He left his home and obeyed God even when he did not know where he was going. He believed he could have a son even when it defied all known reality. He believed God could raise the dead even though he'd never seen it done before. And I'm going to tell you, that's about as close as you get to blind faith. Just believe in God. And I'm going to tell you this morning, there's going to come a time in your life when you are going to have blind faith. Blind faith. Even salvation, see. Salvation is talked about in God's Word. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. But a lot of people just can't believe that. You have to just believe this morning that God can save you. A lot of people struggle with service. My service for God, I don't know that it amounts to anything. God says this, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. We talk about our giving. We talk about giving, and people just do not believe God, that God can meet their needs if they will tithe and give to Him. But I believe what the Bible says, that God can meet your needs. And some people struggle with that, and they put it down on paper, and they say, well, we don't have any money left over. Let me tell you something. Give to God first. Trust Him. You'd be amazed. I can't put it all on paper for you, but I can tell you, you can trust God. Believe God's promises. Abraham took all the promises of God, and he says, I'm just going to believe them. When God said it, I'm just going to buy it. I'm not going to sell it. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to believe it. There's a story about a 2-story house that caught on fire. And the family was making their way out of the house when the smallest boy became terrified, and he tore away from his mother and he ran back upstairs. Suddenly, he appeared at a smoke-filled window crying hysterically. Standing outside, just below the window, was his father. And his father said, "Jump, son, jump. I'll catch you." The boy cried, "But Daddy, I can't see you. I can't see you." "I know," his father said, "but I can see you. I can see you." The moral of the story is this: Abraham may not have been able to see how it would all turn out, but he trusted his father's voice. He, in essence, jumped, and God caught him. He just believed God. God said, "Leave." He left. God said, "You're going to have a son." He said, "Hallelujah." He said, "You got to go sacrifice your son." He said, "Okay." He just believed God. I believe this morning that we can believe God and His promises. I just believe it. 2015 could be the year you just, again, grow spiritually. Just go, shoo. You ever seen one of our kids? They seem like they grow 6 inches in a couple of months, a foot in a year. Quinn was about this high when he started coming here, and all of a sudden, he went taller than about anybody else here. And let me tell you something. That's the way it happens. And you can do that spiritually, and you know how it's going to start? By just believing God. Just trusting Him. If He says do it, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it because I know He will take care of the matter.